Some analysts have argued the violent unrest seen earlier this month is a result of the infighting within the governing party. Several of the ANC's most senior members are deeply implicated in corruption. At the same time, the Political Party Funding Act came into effect in April, which will ensure parties disclose information about who funds them. Civil society groups have now launched a coalition to make sure certain political leaders are held accountable. For more on this, we're joined by Robyn Pasensie, the Political Party Funding Officer at My Vote, My Count. Thank you very much, Robyn, for your time this evening. Now, first of all, we know that the watchdog was launched today, right? So when exactly do you start your work and how will it work?
Well, first of all, good evening and thank you for having me. Just a small correction. The coalition will launch officially next week, Tuesday, the 3rd of August. And I suppose that, to answer your question, is really where our work will begin.
And just tell me a little bit, Robyn, of how it's going to work. How are you, for instance, going to make sure that no information is being hidden from you, for instance, by political parties?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've mentioned it in a very good introduction that you gave, is that the work of the coalition here is really a small cohort of dedicated organizations who, in their own right, have done work on corruption, government malfeasance, and really trying to see what the connection is between private, unregulated money in our politics. And what we see the work of the coalition doing is on a few pillars. So on the one hand, it is advocacy and campaigning so that the public has access to information, particularly when they go to the polls to vote. We want people to be able to know who they're voting for. Our political parties are those bodies that are endowed with the ability to make political decisions on our behalf. So we think that it's really important that the public has access to that kind of information. So that's kind of on the one hand. Secondly, it's advocacy around what we think could still be opportunities for corruption in our politics. While we welcome the PPFA, we think it's a historic piece of legislation. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not the only thing that's going to make the change, and this coalition is really formed to help shift that political culture where we put public good sort of over private interests. And I think to that end, which we will have more on that when we launch next week, Tuesday, is what we would also like to have in future is essentially kind of like a transparency barometer where this kind of data and information that comes out from disclosures is easily accessible and available to the public, to media, to journalists. And I think for us as the coalition, there will be a bit of a wait-and-see approach because we are obviously waiting for the IEC to publish those disclosures from political parties. That'll probably be somewhere around September. So once we have that information, and obviously the next quarter and the quarter after that, we should be able to make greater connections and claims and do more with that information when that comes out.
And, you know, for example, where would the information be reached by the public? Where exactly would they be able to get in contact with the watchdog to see exactly who they're voting for, etc.?
So the coalition, as I said, is made up of a small cohort of dedicated individuals or individual organizations. My Vote Counts is one of that. We are joined by Open and Secrets, Corruption Watch, and the Amakatara Foundation. And for the time being, the transparency barometer, as we will do that in time to come, and some of our other information and data will be housed on the My Vote Counts website and hopefully in time to come on the Coalition for Party Funding's website as well. Then we hope that this will be the space where the public will have access to information about this on a constant basis or as they need.
And of course, when we look at what we've seen in courts, for instance, with that 500 million around the president's campaign, this will, of course, be very important for the public to know beforehand, before we go to the polls, you know, exactly who funds the different political parties, if they believe in those organizations and if they think those organizations will influence the party they're voting for.
Absolutely. I think you just hit the nail on the head there. That's essentially the work that the coalition does as a collective. We should draw those kind of links and to make that known. Just specifically because this coalition is around the Political Party Funding Act, of course, the Act itself has certain parameters, and it speaks to party funding in general. In other words, donations coming into a political party. It doesn't yet speak to intra-party financing, and I think that could be another space in future that we need to look at, particularly if this is happening with our governing party and people want to know that our politicians are not being bought. And that's an important bit of information to have.
I see one of the things that I've put down here about the coalition, what you've pledged to do collectively. One of the things mentioned is that you would monitor and evaluate compliance with the funding disclosure process. Explain to us what would happen here. I think that's where I'm a bit, I just want to know more information, because how will the watchdog make sure that no information is being hidden from you, that none of the political parties are lying to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficult part. And of course, the IEC is the body that does that regulating and compliance. That's what they've been endowed with in terms of the regulations with the PPFA. But they've got such a large mandate. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And really, when we talk about monitoring and evaluation, what we would like to do is see, okay, so when the IEC publishes these disclosures, we would kind of take an auditing approach. Okay, like, who is actually funding you? Who are these individuals, these organizations? What is the frequency? What does this mean? And try to draw conclusions or greater information from that. And I think really the avenue for us would be to continue to add public pressure and advocacy around that. Because, of course, the IEC would be the body that would mete out sort of fines or punishment for political parties who don't comply. But I think we would be remiss in our duties as sort of activists or civil society organizations if we didn't take a step forward and say, you know what, we are also interested in shifting the political culture, that it's more about the public good. So really our space for monitoring and evaluation will only happen after the disclosures are made by the IEC, because we will have access to that information as the public will. We'd be able to draw some links with that data, hopefully, and then to continue to, as I say, add public pressure and advocacy around those spaces, and hopefully shine a spotlight, if that is the case, on those political parties who are not complying as they should.
All right. Political Party Funding Officer at My Vote Counts, Robyn Pasensie, thank you very much for your time.